Well, I've just been with Margaret Wilson for a couple of days before I left the UK. I'm now in Bangkok. Margaret is the wife of Guy, daughter of Billy Peterson, who took issue with Jim Taylor Jr. over his behaviour at Aberdeen and afterwards in New York, and was promptly withdrawn from. Now, Margaret is actually the great-granddaughter of JT Sr. And he had a lot to do with her parents' marriage, had them in to live with him for a while, I think when they were first married. So, yeah, Margaret is remarkably clear. She would have liked to have done this video herself, but she's somewhat inhibited because she's in a hospital at the moment and they're not allowed to do videos. So I said I would do it. Hopefully she'll do it herself. But this is her first-hand account of the time around Aberdeen, which was followed by the New York split, when that happened when her father, Billy, took issue with Jim Taylor. So this is her statement, which she finalised on the 29th of December 2019. I am JT Sr.'s great-granddaughter, so JT Jr. was my father's uncle, hence I shall call him Uncle Jim. Uncle Jim started drinking socially, taking his children to restaurants and buying them alcoholic beverages from a young age. Sadly, the children of alcoholics are often alcoholics too, and Concy Hales was in this category. Margaret herself actually went to New York on a trip when JT Jr. was there and witnessed him drinking heavily at Bruce and Concy's house. In those days, Uncle Jim was a shy man and gradually found that a few drinks helped him through meetings. Brethren were not used to seeing the effects of alcohol on one another because they tended to drink in moderation or not at all. Therefore, the slurred speech went largely undetected. Uncle Jim was hospitalised in 1965 due to the effect of alcohol on his liver. A small group knew of this, including his sons Ben and James, and kept it very much to themselves for fear of what it might do to the exclusive Brethren movement. As the 1960s progressed, meetings became riotous, a change from the mere starchy fare, and was seen by only a few as a manifestation of the advanced stage of alcoholism. New rules were made more frequently, the most notable being the one admonishing the women to wear their hair down as a sign of affection for him, for Uncle Jim. Many protested, but under threat we complied. The system accelerated at the end of the 60s, and Aunt Renee, Uncle Jim's second wife, found his behaviour embarrassing. More frequently, when Uncle Jim went away on a ministerial tour, she would decide to go, saying she wasn't feeling well. Declined to go, saying she wasn't feeling well. Without her influence, Uncle Jim's behaviour worsened. The meetings at Aberdeen were a case in point. Aunt Renee stayed in New York while Uncle Jim disgraced himself publicly and went to bed with Madeleine Kerr privately. I spent Christmas 1969 in Australia and watched Uncle Jim and Concy Hales drinking at the home of W. Bruce Hales until they were bleary-eyed. Aunt Renee did not come on this trip either. Uncle Jim flew first class, where alcoholic beverages were free, and Rebecca Lyons and I were in second class. It was on this trip that I met one of John Hales' sons, who I believe was born on 26th of June 1950, my birthday. It's interesting, Margaret is adamant that Jim Taylor wanted her mother, Billy Peterson, to spend time with him, as well as Madeleine Kerr, but she declined. I was so concerned about Uncle Jim's drinking in Sydney, Australia, that when I phoned home, I spoke to my father about it. He asked me if any of the brethren were concerned. 3 persons had spoken to me about it. My father was a system supporter and was totally loyal to the brethren and his uncle. By this time, brethren were drinking alcohol more generally, and my father knew his uncle was no exception. It took learning from Aunt Renee Taylor of her pain regarding Madeleine Kerr and her concern about Uncle Jim's alcoholism to stop my father in his tracks. After that, he did his best to seek justice. For this, I am fervently thankful, or I would still be locked in a system of error and control. Several weeks after the Aberdeen meetings, the Kerrs stayed with Uncle Jim and Aunt Renee in New York. A. Bufton Parker and Mr. Hoyt, leaders of New York, had been withdrawn from by Uncle Jim over the phone for listening to the tapes of the Aberdeen meetings. My mother was so troubled about what was going on that she phoned Uncle Jim. Aunt Renee answered and poured out her feelings, telling my mother that she was torn between her fears about the alcohol and her husband's claim that the Lord was telling him what to do. Uncle Jim and Madeleine Kerr were closeted alone together for hours. My mother relayed this to my father, who went to see Uncle Jim about getting a doctor. Uncle Jim wouldn't see the doctor, but Aunt Renee gladly reiterated what she had said to my mother, this time to my father in person. My father went to see James, who suggested withdrawing from his own father. That's James III, suggested withdrawing from JT Jr. However, when James went to see his father, Uncle Jim convinced James that his ministry was of the Pauline line, or equal to that of the Apostle Paul. My father then went to see Uncle Jim's elder son, Ben Taylor, who willingly acknowledged his father's illness and resultant conduct. My father took care not to answer our phone in case he was withdrawn from over the phone, as Stanley McCallum and others had been. That Saturday, August 22, 1970, Uncle Jim showed up at the Nostrand Avenue meeting as sober as a judge. No slurred speech, no bare feet, no nonsense. My father opened the meeting by saying, "Certain members have come to our attention which we can no longer ignore." Certain matters have come to our attention which we can no longer ignore. Uncle Jim said, "He says I need a doctor. He needs a doctor. I withdraw from you, Bill." When my father proceeded to calmly state the case, Uncle Jim ordered his own supporters to leave. Only one lady left. The rest wandered about in bewilderment, and others cried aloud. Many never heard the facts. The execution of Mr. Parker and Mr. Hoyt, who had obtained the tapes of the Aberdeen meetings, was still fresh in our minds, and we knew that something was awfully wrong. New York was split down the middle. The suffering in those families who had lost members and friends was terrible. Those who decided for Uncle Jim were instantly locked behind the wall of shunning, so were prevented from hearing the truth. One of the first things my father and Uncle Ben did was visit the various brethren who had been ruthlessly withdrawn from. Fearing the worst, the two men received nothing but love and forgiveness, which they found humbling. Ben Taylor's son John was staying with exclusives in England on the fateful day of the New York split. so was encouraged to shun his parents who were with us. He went to live in the basement of his grandfather's, Uncle Jim's house, where an abundant supply of whiskey had been stored. In a short time, he went home to his father's house and left the exclusives. Uncle Jim died in October 1970. The doctor said he couldn't do anything about the damage alcohol had done to his brain. His biggest crime was not his alcoholism, but the cruel division of families that were, by this time, strewn across the earth. That continues to this day. On the day of his death, Uncle Jim's representatives were in court, suing my father for a breach of the peace to do with the August 22nd split. The judge announced that Uncle Jim was dying and his two sons were called to his bedside. It was quite a drama. Needless to say, the case was closed. Those who stay in the exclusives do so because of fear, fame, family, finance and friends. It is known as entrapment. Margaret Peterson Wilson. Well, that's very clear, isn't it? And Margaret's mother, Billy's wife, still alive, aged 97, confirms everything that Margaret says in that statement. So there's witness there, and the brethren in New York need to review the treatment of brothers like ABP, Hoyt, Billy Peterson, others that were drawn from in those years, and put it right, quite simply, because the whole Aberdeen story was a sham. The tapes were correct. My father rang through to Jim Taylor. He said, "Don't believe a word of them." Well, he was lying to get away with what he got away with. And that lies has now become monstrous in the lives that the Hale's sons, Gareth, Dean, Charles, and Greg are promoting to the media, completely different to what the brethren hear. So lies is a very serious matter, and it's coming out in all sorts of connections now. So we simply need to stand by the truth, acknowledge it in assembly, put things right, and just repent and face up so that we can move forward once everything's adjusted in a much happier frame, because we're never happy when we're hiding things. Much better if it's all out in the open. Thanks.